Hey fellow nerds, when it comes to model railroading, my favorite dive bar is somewhere between scratch building and kit bashing, and I usually prefer the bashing. There's so many good kits out there. I really love the ones from long ago, and therefore a question I ask pretty often is, what's that kit? Welcome to Rust and HO Scale. Today's video demonstrates how I built the Scotia Scale Models flat car. It's a 36-foot truss rod flat car offered with Halifax and Southwestern as the road name. I think this kit was produced in 1973-ish. It's long out of production. I've had a hard time finding info on the company, but I've seen other models like this available on eBay. The kit was made in Canada. The instructions claim that the model was distributed by R.H. Shear Enterprises, and I don't know if that's the name of the creator or just somebody distributing it. The drawing is signed by L.P. Simard. I had been looking for a Craftsman-style wooden flat car when I ran across this Scotia scale model. There's a lot of stripwood in here. This roll of planks are for the floor. All of these little detail parts are great. I have no idea how I'm going to attach all these. And then there's this little tiny nylon wire, which I guess is for the truss rods. It'll be fun. I do really like the drawings and instructions. The drawings are nice, but could have been a little bit more chronological and mixed with the instructions, which could have also been a little clearer, but really I had no issues. Very quickly I realized this car was going to be a bit light. I weighed it and I was right. Without the trucks, it's only 1/10 of an ounce. The trucks weigh about 1/2 an ounce. So adding a potential load, this Woodland Scenics 1932 Ford flatbed, it's a flatbed on a flatbed. It's an all-white metal kit and it weighs about 1.5 ounces. With the load, the car would weigh about 2.3 ounces and needs to weigh about 3.3 ounces. So I'll have to try to add 1 ounce of lead in the car later. With any project, I like to stain my wood pieces first. My typical stain mix is 15 drops of black India ink with 5 drops of brown India ink into 1 ounce of alcohol. Unfortunately, it's isopropyl alcohol. Staining is pretty easy. I just soak it thoroughly with no care to how much I put on it. I don't like to miss a spot, but I'm certainly not concerned with overlapping or reapplying. It just helps with the randomness that wood naturally would accomplish. Slather it on and you'll be fine. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 sticks later and we're all done. I'm using my calipers to measure the diameter of the queen post pegs. Then I'm selecting a drill bit almost the exact same size. But my recent experience is suggesting that I should have gone about 10% larger. This would have allowed me to use far less pressure to seat the queen posts while gluing them in place. Unfortunately, my footage of drilling the holes was lost, along with my footage of drilling the holes for the stake pockets on the side sills. But I've shot the final result, and as you can see, there are 16 stake pockets with 2 holes each, so I've just saved you the boring video of the guy drilling 40 holes. You're welcome. I needed to quickly prime all the small parts, so I used a piece of tape and secured them all to a box. My favorite rattle can primer, and I'm sorry there's some Blair Witch style footage here. It's apparently hard to hold the phone in one hand while still moving the spray can with the other. Remind me to use a tripod next time. But ultimately it only took 1 coat and we're ready to go. Love it. Call this piece the draft gear bearing plate. It's mounted between the 2 center stringers. This gives the car more material at each end to support the trucks and the couplers. I'm measuring it to the template and cutting it to length. The instructions for the car assembly are basically all in step 2. All the other steps are just details, and I quote, "Using the template, lay out the side sills, the 6 stringers, and the end sills and the buffer blocks. The draft gear bearing plate is set between the 2 center sills. Make sure they are all square and true." So I did things in exactly not that order. Doing it in my own order didn't seem to cause a problem. Making sure it comes out flat, square, and true is really the only thing that's critical. So do it in whatever order makes it easiest for you to accomplish that. I begin with the draft gear. I begin with the draft gear bearing plates and the center stringers. Starting off simple seemed like a good way to start. I'm hopeful that I'll be able to get things square and true. I'll say square and true a lot. I really did dumb this down and only did one end of the car, just 3 pieces. Once I was happy with that end though, I added the other bearing plate and glued it to place. Looks good so far. Next I added the bolsters, which were challenging to get both centered and square. This is where the trucks are mounted. I had to get them in the right spot lengthwise along the center beam. Then I had to get them centered and then square and not tilted and not twisted. What makes this stuff fun though is that there's 0 tactile guidance. There's no pins to line up or posts to insert. There's no slot or anything to guide you by feel. You have to use your eyes and get it right. And when you don't get it right, you take it off and you do it again. Trust me, this is the 2nd or 3rd try on each of these. After I had the pedestal beams and bolsters in place, I worked on the side sills. The side sills fit into the notch in the pedestal beams. Then they are abutted to the bolsters. But since the top of the stringers and the tops of the side sills are on the same plane, I'm able to turn the car over and ensure flatness with weight. So I let this set up overnight. My lady had painted me a nice rock, which happens to add just the right amount of pressure. I'm adding the other stringers, making 6 in all. Yep, it's a 6-stringer. I didn't fret too much over the positions. Go back and listen for the pun. Anyway, I was a bit over-ambitious, and I tried to do all of these at once. There's just no need for that. I should have glued half of them. The only important thing, though, is that they're all even at the ends, and to get this right, I've reused my trusty tweezers to line them up. Yeah, I know, that's not their primary purpose, but Alton Brown hates unitaskers, and so do I. With all the stringers in place, I'm going to add a little weight to flatten the car. Again, so Keystone Locomotive Works, Page Enterprises, and Western Scale Models. Maybe these are previews of future videos. I guess I've proven that you can assemble this car in any order you like. The only important thing is to make sure the assembly comes out flat, square, and true. Use flat tabletops, use 1, 2, 3 blocks, whatever it takes to get the car flat. What worked well for me was placing the assembled car face down on my tabletop and adding weight. The car is nearly perfectly flat. Adding these truck bolsters wasn't difficult, but again, there's no tactile guidance. Just eyeballing it and trying to get it centered in both directions. The end sills were also no trouble, except that I managed to not get any footage of it. So here you have a static shot of the assembly in the clamping fixture. Pretty much done. This was my final chance to get the car square, so this clamp helped a lot. Finally, let's start painting. This is one of my favorite types of colors. Ugly. Not really. It's just a very light green with a very 1960s vibe. I decided to dry brush this for minimal coverage, hoping that it comes out looking like it needs a fresh coat of paint. This is why we build things from stripwood. We want that wooden texture to show through. If I was going to give it full coverage paint job, then we'd just use a styrene model. I'm trying to get the look of very old paint on very old wood. A light touch with a dry brush will give me that look. Another thing, I'm only trying to do the sides here. I'm not trying to paint the top or the bottom. If I do get some on the top, it'll just get covered by the floor planks. If I do get some on the bottom, I can scrape it off or sand it off. It'll look fine, but mostly just trying to get the sides as if they only painted the sides of the car. After painting the main color, I like to put on a highlight color like this deck tan or a linen color. Not quite a white, not as dark as a taupe. Deck tan's one of my favorites. This is another dry brush technique. I'm just hitting the high spots and trying to use a very dry brush, even less than the previous color. I don't want to simply cover the base coat with the highlight color. I want to highlight, so just the highlights. It's time now to stop ignoring all these small detail parts. I've given them a shaky coat of rattle can primer, if you recall. Now I want to add a little color texture as well as brighten them up some. I typically use a variety of shades for this. Today I've selected the basic orange, brown, and light rust. I'm not dry brushing. My brush is a little wetter than that. If the brush gets dry, it's okay, but it's not deliberate. I've seen others use small pieces of sponge, and I'll be testing that technique soon, but for now, I just use the brush and dab a little, touching each part. Then I switch colors and dab some more. I'll do this again later in the video and add even more color and texture. I give the same treatment to the trucks and couplers. Both of these have a base coat of oxide red, but adding the color texture is the same. I add some of the first color, then switch, then add the other. So the instructions read, drill the holes for the queen posts, fasten the queen posts to the beams. That's it. I chose to drill the holes earlier in the video and before I mounted the pedestal beams, and I'm glad I did that. But now I've re-drilled them slightly larger, and I'm glad I did that too. This allows the queen posts to slide in with a gentle push. They fit snugly, and once pressed in, I just use the tweezers to correct their direction and then let the glue set. Once you've got the process down, you just do that 7 more times and you're on to the next step. These stake pockets are a well-made detail. Once they are installed, they look great and they're sturdy. The hard part is drilling the holes in the right spot. And you'll love this, while my camera storage was full, I got a great shot of me using my calipers to accurately measure the distance between the 2 pegs. Then using the points of the calipers, I pressed into the wood at the drill sites. This ensured that the 2 holes would be the right distance apart and relatively level. Then I drilled and drilled and drilled. Unlike the queen post, I did not make these holes slightly oversized. As such, this was the cause of me breaking a few of the pegs, and therefore, I think 3 of these are now held in with just 1 peg. But it's no matter. The glue is doing its work, and I'll do better next time. Installing the truss rods. Even the instructions admitted that this is the most tedious part of the build. The recommendation is to cut little pieces of wood this exact size, then carve a little notch in one side of it and pinch the nylon string between the wood and the floorboard. Since the floorboards aren't even installed on my model yet, I had to improvise. I cut the little pieces as directed, about 1/8 by 1/8 by 1/16. In other words, really small. But instead of fastening the string as suggested, I chose to drill a tiny hole through the middle of them. Then I inserted the nylon string through the hole and glued the string to the wood. Then, once the string was glued to the wood, I glued it in place with more CA glue. As a final precaution, I dabbed another blot of glue to each piece, which should hold the piece and the string in place. The second portion of the instructions says to achieve the desired tension, we're to glue both ends with moderate pressure while stretching the string over one of the queen posts. Then once the glue is set, we'll gently stretch the nylon over the second queen post. This worked out perfectly. Now ideally, you'd want to watch a YouTuber who actually doesn't mess up his footage at the most critical part of the video. Maybe next time, because the camera filled up again, but not before I got a lot of great shots out of frame, and then some others in frame but out of focus, and as you can see, I'm not too good of a YouTuber, but I'm getting better, I guess. Anyway, like and subscribe so that I'll stay motivated and you can actually watch my progress. The turnbuckles are a really nice detail as well. They look really good once installed, but the challenge for me was clipping them apart. I used my metal snips, which did separate them, but also crimped them. Then I needed to uncrimp them by using my X-Acto knife blade, and that was a bit challenging, but I'm not sure what the recommended way of separating these is. Putting the turnbuckle in place on the string and then trying to crimp it proved pretty difficult. As a result, the string becomes a spring, and it flings the little turnbuckles off into space. I was actually lucky to find it. The better option proved to be grabbing the piece with the pliers, then using the pliers to put it on the string, and once I got it there, clamp it down. My favorite part is the brake details. As you might remember, I'm not actually a big fan of this kind of detail. I enjoy the details which are visible. These parts are only visible if you pick up the car. It's certainly not visible on the train while it's moving. The instructions state the amount of detail is up to the individual, so technically I'm following the instructions. But I did add a brake cylinder and the brake levers. I usually go pretty minimal on this stuff. Stirrups are a pretty standard detail. I had to drill pretty large holes to accommodate the supplied metal staples. Yeah, that's why they call these kits sticks and staples. Since the hole was pretty large in proportion to the side sill thickness, one of the holes broke out a little bit on the inside. Fortunately, I was able to get it back centered up, and all in all, this is becoming pretty standard stuff for me. It's impressive that I had 250 gigs of footage for this video, and yet I still managed to miss so many good shots, like the one of me cutting lead strips for adding weight. Remember when we said we probably needed to add weight? Well, I've cut some strips of lead about 1/8 of an inch wide to fit between the center stringers here. The lead sheet that I have is 1/32 thick, and I'll be able to fit 3 pieces inside this center space. This will add about 1 ounce of weight. I also missed the shot where I painted the top of one of these black and the bottom of the other one rust so that you can see shadows through the floorboards, and from the top you just see rust. So I suppose molten lead would have been a better option here, giving me a little more utilization of the space, but this worked well enough. Mounting the brake wheel was cool. The instructions weren't crystal clear, but I figured it out. There's a bracket that you need to install on the bottom of the frame. Then there's another bracket that has a hole through it. It's mounted to the top of the frame. To paint that rusty little detail, and frankly all the other things that I've added recently, I need to break out the oxide red enamel again. I'm using Flowcool here just because I have it, but any enamel paint will work. I'm using enamel because I'm painting metal parts without a primer. Otherwise, I just use acrylics. In fact, this might be the only jar of enamel that I use all year. I'm having to paint the truss rods, which are nylon strings. I need to paint the brass turnbuckles. I need to paint the plastic brake details. I need to paint the brake wheel bracket. I need to paint the stirrups, which are steel staples. The enamel works well on all sorts of materials, and the acrylic would not do so well on these. Now, it wouldn't be very smart to call my channel Rust in HO scale if I weren't going to feature some rust. My daughter can confirm, rust is my favorite color. So here I am adding more shades of rust. I'm using a variety of colors again. Panzer Ace's dark rust, orange brown again. The other thing I'm adding here though is a rust wash. The wash is a less opaque paint, and I'm trying to give the effect of the weather, rain, having washed the rust from the stake pockets down onto the paint. I think the effect came out pretty good. When drilling the holes for mounting the trucks, it's crucial that the drill hole is centered and perpendicular. It should be centered left to right and centered in the bolster, but also it needs to be straight up and down, true square and plumb in all directions. Something I do in situations like this is to drill a pilot hole first with a smaller drill bit, about half the size of the final desired result. Then, as I drill with the final result, I can try and recenter for fine tuning. And by the way, this is a Katie tap set number 246. The final result is a number 2 screw -56 thread. I use the number 50 drill bit, then the tap. I just fit the tap into my larger pin vise, and the wood offers such little resistance that you can get it done this way without any issue. It's worked really well. This is one of the funner steps for me, adding the floorboards. I think that part of the reason it's fun for me is because there's so much visual progress made with such a little amount of work. It feels very gratifying. But first, we need to stain them and let them dry. I'm staining them with 2 dilutions of India ink, one of which is my favorite 15 black drops with 5 brown drops. The other stain is simply 5 black, 5 brown, so a little lighter and browner. That gives me a medium shade and a light shade. I'm making a few of them darker by applying the mixture a second time. This gives me a really good variety. The variation is a lot more evident than it looks right now though, so be careful not to overdo it. Once we've stained the floorboards, we can then start adding them to the decking. This is super simple. Cutting out the notches for the stake pockets is the only bit of modification you need to make. Otherwise, the boards are already cut to length and you just glue them on. And frankly, you kind of can be careless because if you make them too perfect, then I don't know, it's just not as fun. Maybe it's more realistic to make them perfect. I mean, there's no way in real life that car builders would lay these boards out of line by like 2 or 3 inches, or they would at least line them up pretty close, and well, at 1/87th scale, you wouldn't be able to see the error. But in our modeling world, making them look a bit imperfect actually gives the impression of realism. This is kind of what I'm going for. Otherwise, it just starts to look plastic. I mean, if you're going to take the time to hand lay the wood, you want it to look hand laid. Therefore, you want it to be a little imperfect. But I digress. Anyway, just lay them down. I had to clip about every fifth one to make it shorter, and then when I came to the next stake pocket, I had to cut a little notch out of each side of end board, and then that was a bit time consuming because I had to do that on 2 boards on both ends. The final result of the floorboards on the car looks awesome. I think the whole car is beginning to look really good. The undercarriage, the sides, the weathering, all good so far. Earlier in the build, I drilled the holes for the truss rod bolt ends. On a real car, the truss rods terminate into the end sill and are secured with a large bolt. They are adjusted for tightness with the turnbuckles in the center of the car. We installed those earlier. On the model, the ends are just decorative, so I don't really need to be super accurate here. I did try to get them centered vertically and centered between the stringers. As you can see here, I've already installed and mounted the brake wheel, which would have been a really good shot to show you. More clear evidence that I'm still learning all this. But what I am doing well here is that I'm just putting a little bit of glue on these truss rod bolt ends and then pushing them into the holes. Now that I'm smart enough to make the holes slightly oversized, these slid into place very smoothly. If you learn one thing from my plethora of mistakes today, take this one. Drill the holes about 10, maybe 15, or even 20% larger than they need to be. This will help you a lot. Overall, this car assembled pretty simply if you were careful, but this is one area that didn't have a great result. On the bottom side of the car, where the coupler pocket is mounted, it needs to be more flat. I had to shave off some of the wood here to make a flat surface. Doing this allowed the coupler pocket to have quite a bit more gluing surface. Possibly I could have had a better result by aligning the buffer blocks at the end of the cars to the bottom of the frame and stringers. But either way, this worked out well. Gluing the coupler pockets was level 1 stuff, about as basic as you can get. Now that there's a flat surface, I can just put some super glue, place the top of the coupler box, load the spring and the coupler in place, and then glue on the other half of the coupler box. Voila! Getting the couplers to the correct height is critical for consistency when running your cars. Here you can see that the coupler height is a bit low, and this is with 1 washer, and thus I decided that 2 washers would be required to make this work. A better solution would have been to replace the bearing plate, that small piece of wood between the bolster and the trucks, with a thicker piece. If I had done that before, I could have sanded it down to the perfect thickness. There would be less parts to fiddle with and more area for the threads and grip for the truck screw. I might do this in retrofit. The floorboards look good, the couplers look good, the brake wheel looks good. I like it so far. So let's add some decals. Actually attempted to use these decals. I thought maybe Halifax and Southwestern, I could conceivably create a backstory for how this old car arrived at my Santa Clara River Valley in northern LA County, but I didn't have to worry about it. So these decals disintegrated. They were no use at all. I actually had to spend time cleaning the car up afterwards. It was really pretty bad. But in defense, they're 50 years old, and you can't really expect 50-year-old decals to work perfectly, so Santa Clara River Valley it is. I typically suggest a coat or 2 of Microsol after applying your decals. This solvent will dissolve the decals just a little. This will help them adhere better to the model and help them form to the shape of your model better. Remember this guy? Like The Shining? He's back! 2 things I'm trying to accomplish here. You can see that these details are a bit bright. You may also notice that the original coat of light green is very muted, so I'm reapplying my dry brush of the green to dull the decals and emphasize the base coat. As I was doing it, I was a little concerned that I was overdoing it, and I kept rubbing it off. But after I was finished, I decided it was perfect. Though the green was good now, I still felt like the car was a little too clean. It needed more dirt. I chose this olive drab color. I just felt like it was the right color for this car. I used a little combination of dry brushing and then washing, but I decided to thin it a little bit in a panic, so I just used the decal water that was sitting on the table, not planning it at all. That's the way it goes sometimes. Our last finishing technique is the flat clear by Tamiya. This should be really quick and I don't have to be careful. I can literally touch anything, including the trucks. So I'm just using an ample amount and laying it on pretty thick. Mostly I just need to make sure that I get the decals well covered, because they're the ones that are shiny, and after that it should be good. So that's a wrap. Scotia scale models 36-foot truss rod flat car made entirely of wood. I love the texture of the floorboards. That's the primary reason for building this car. The stake pockets and other details look great too. I think I did a nice job weathering it. I really enjoyed this build. My journey from this is lame to this is great was meteoric. I might even build a few more of these if I can find some. I don't think I'll do too much different. The buffer block alignment and bigger truck mounts are changes I would make, but everything's easier the second time through. I really appreciate you watching this video. If you enjoyed it, then please support my channel by crushing the like button or tapping the subscribe or ringing the notification bell. Also, leave me a comment about my great jokes or my erroneous info. I'll try to get another video out in a month or so, and I'll do better next time. Till then, keep on modeling and I'll see you soon.